The laughter started as a hiccup, just a tiny sound that escaped Lily Forsythe's lips as she stood in the dusty chapel of Los Lunas, New Mexico, staring down at the coffin containing the remains of Jeremiah Hutchins, the town's former mayor who had died at the ripe age of 73 in the summer of 1878. It was not the death that struck her as funny, not at all, but rather the memory that flooded her mind at that precise moment, a memory of the pompous old man slipping on a patch of mud outside the general store and landing flat on his backside, his top hat rolling into a horse trough, while he sputtered indignantly about the state of the town's roads. The memory arrived unbidden, triggered perhaps by the sight of that same top hat now resting on the closed portion of the split coffin lid, polished to an absurd shine, as if death itself demanded the utmost propriety. She tried to swallow the sound, she truly did, pressing her gloved hand against her mouth as her shoulders began to shake. But grief was a peculiar thing, and sometimes it twisted itself into shapes that made no sense to the rational mind. Her mother had died just 3 months prior, wasting away from consumption in their small adobe house on the edge of town, and Lily had not cried once during those final terrible weeks. She had been stoic, efficient, caring for her mother with steady hands and a heart that felt encased in iron. Everyone had remarked on her strength, her composure, her dignity in the face of such sorrow. But now, standing in this chapel with its whitewashed walls and rough-hewn pews, surrounded by the entire population of Los Lunas dressed in their mourning blacks, the dam simply broke. The laughter came in waves, rolling out of her chest with a force she could not control. It was not quiet or polite, not the kind of subdued chuckle one might hide behind a handkerchief. It was loud, raucous, the kind of laughter that echoed off the adobe walls and made heads snap around with expressions of shock and horror. Lily doubled over, gasping for breath between peals of laughter that sounded almost like sobs, and perhaps they were both. All the grief she had held back now pouring out in this utterly inappropriate display. "Miss Forsythe," Mrs. Henderson, the banker's wife, hissed from the pew behind her, but Lily could not stop. She stumbled backward, tears streaming down her face, her whole body shaking with the force of her mirth or her sorrow. She no longer knew which. The Reverend, a thin man with a perpetually sour expression, stopped mid-eulogy and stared at her with undisguised disapproval. She needed air. She needed to escape. Lily turned and fled down the center aisle, her black skirt swishing around her legs as she pushed through the heavy wooden doors and out into the brilliant August sunshine. The heat hit her like a physical blow after the relative coolness of the chapel, and she staggered to the side of the building, collapsing against the wall as the laughter finally subsided into ragged breathing. What had she done? The horror of it began to sink in slowly, replacing the strange euphoria that had gripped her. She had laughed loudly and disruptively at a funeral, at the mayor's funeral no less, with half the territory's officials in attendance. Her reputation, already fragile as a young unmarried woman of 22 living alone after her mother's death, would be utterly destroyed. She heard the chapel doors open and close, heard the murmur of scandalized voices, but she could not bring herself to move. She simply stood there, her forehead pressed against the sun-warmed adobe, wishing the earth would open up and swallow her whole. "That was quite a performance in there," a male voice said from somewhere to her left. The tone neither condemning nor mocking, just observational. Lily's eyes flew open and she turned to see a man leaning against the corner of the building, one boot propped up against the wall behind him. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with dark hair that fell just past his collar and eyes the color of whiskey in sunlight. He wore dusty trail clothes, a dark vest over a plain shirt, and a gun belt slung low on his hips. A cowboy, clearly, though she did not recognize him as one of the local ranch hands. "I did not realize I had an audience," Lily said stiffly, trying to gather the shreds of her dignity around her like a cloak. Her voice still shook slightly, and she hated herself for it. "Everyone in that chapel was your audience," the cowboy said mildly. He pulled a cigarette from his vest pocket and struck a match against the wall, cupping his hands around the flame. "Though I suspect that was not exactly what you were aiming for. Are you here to lecture me on proper behavior?" Lily asked, hearing the defensive sharpness in her own voice. "Because I assure you, I am well aware that what just happened was completely unacceptable." "No lecture?" the man said, exhaling a stream of smoke that dissipated quickly in the dry air. "I am just curious what could make a woman laugh like that at old Hutchins' send-off." He was a bore in life, but I did not figure him for comedy and death. Despite herself, despite everything, Lily felt her lips twitch. You knew him? Had the misfortune of several interactions with the man. He once fined me $20 for letting my horse drink from the public fountain, said it was unsanitary. The cowboy's expression remained serious, but there was a glint of amusement in those amber eyes. The fountain was a horse trough. That was its entire purpose. A small choked sound escaped Lily's throat, somewhere between a laugh and a sob. She clamped her hand over her mouth again, horrified at herself. I should not be laughing. I should not have laughed in there. What is wrong with me? The cowboy regarded her steadily for a long moment, then pushed off from the wall and walked closer. He was even taller up close, broad-shouldered and lean in the way of men who spent their lives in the saddle. There was a scar along his jawline, pale against his sun-bronzed skin, and his hands looked capable and strong. Nothing is wrong with you, he said quietly. Sometimes laughter heals better than tears. Lily stared at him, those simple words hitting her with unexpected force. Her eyes filled with tears, real tears this time, not the strange overflow that had accompanied her laughter. Everyone thinks I am a monster, she whispered. They already whispered about me, living alone after Mama died, refusing to move in with the Hendersons like they wanted. Now they will say I am mad, disrespectful, unfit for polite society. Is that such a terrible thing? The cowboy asked. In my experience, polite society is vastly overrated. Easy for you to say, Lily said, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand, not caring that she was probably smearing dust across her face. You are a man. You can go anywhere, do anything. I have to live in this town, face these people every day. I have nowhere else to go. The cowboy took another drag from his cigarette, then dropped it and ground it out under his boot heel. What is your name? Lily Forsythe. She saw no point in withholding it. The entire town knew who she was now, the madwoman who laughed at funerals. Vincent Zavala, he said, and offered his hand. Lily hesitated, then took it, feeling the calluses on his palm, the warm strength of his grip. And you are wrong about one thing, Miss Forsythe. You do have somewhere else to go. You have the whole territory, the whole country if you want it. You are not chained to this town. I have a house here, Lily said, though even as she spoke the words, she heard how hollow they sounded. My mother's things. I cannot just leave. Can you not? Vincent's eyes were steady on hers, and she found she could not look away. Or will you not? Before she could answer, the chapel doors burst open and a stream of black-clad mourners poured out into the sunshine. Lily caught sight of Mrs. Henderson's scandalized face, saw the way people were pointing and whispering, their expressions ranging from shocked to gleeful at this unexpected drama. The funeral procession was forming to carry Jeremiah Hutchins to his final resting place in the cemetery on the hill, but half the town seemed more interested in staring at her. Miss Forsythe, Mrs. Henderson's voice cut through the murmur like a knife. She bustled over, her considerable bulk moving with surprising speed, her face flushed with outrage or exertion, or both. What in heaven's name came over you? Such a display, such complete and utter disrespect for the deceased. Your poor mother must be turning in her grave. The mention of her mother struck Lily like a slap, and she felt herself flinch. But before she could formulate a response, Vincent stepped slightly forward, not quite putting himself between them, but shifting so that his presence was undeniably felt. Mrs. Henderson, he said, his voice polite but utterly flat. I believe Miss Forsythe is not feeling well. The heat can affect people in strange ways. Mrs. Henderson's eyes flicked to Vincent, then back to Lily, her expression calculating. And who might you be, young man? I do not believe we have been introduced. Vincent Zavala. I work for the Double R Ranch up north. The lie came smoothly, easily, and Lily wondered if it was a lie at all, or simply an incomplete truth. I knew Jeremiah Hutchins years back and came to pay my respects. Well, Mr. Zavala, perhaps you should escort poor Miss Forsythe home, since she is so unwell. Mrs. Henderson's tone made it clear that she did not believe the excuse for a moment, but was willing to accept it for the sake of propriety. We cannot have her disrupting the graveside service as well. My thoughts exactly, madam, Vincent said, and before Lily could protest, he had taken her arm and was guiding her away from the chapel, away from the gawking crowd, down the dusty street toward the center of town. Lily went with him, too drained and bewildered to resist, acutely aware of every eye on her back, every whispered comment. They walked in silence for several minutes, past the general store and the saloon, past the blacksmith shop where the ring of hammer on anvil provided a steady counterpoint to their footsteps. Finally, when they had left the main street behind and were approaching the smaller adobe houses on the eastern edge of town, Vincent spoke. "Which one is yours?" Lily pointed to a small, neat house with a covered porch and a struggling garden in front. Her mother had loved that garden, had spent hours coaxing vegetables from the stubborn New Mexico soil. Now the plants were wilting in the August heat, and Lily could not seem to find the energy to care for them properly. Vincent walked her to the porch steps, then released her arm. "Will you be all right?" "I do not know," Lily said honestly. She felt hollowed out, exhausted in a way that went beyond mere physical tiredness. "Thank you for walking me home. You did not have to do that." "I know," Vincent said. He tipped his hat to her, a gesture that might have been mocking from another man, but somehow seemed genuine coming from him. "For what it is worth, Miss Forsythe, I do not think there is anything wrong with your laughter. It sounded like someone finally letting themselves feel something real." He turned to go, and Lily found herself speaking before she could think better of it. "Mr. Zavala, why did you lie to Mrs. Henderson about working for the Double R Ranch?" Vincent glanced back over his shoulder, and for the first time, she saw a genuine smile cross his face, transforming his serious features into something warmer, more approachable. "I did work for them, about 5 years back. Just because I do not work there now does not make it a lie, exactly. More like an economical truth." "What do you do now?" Lily asked, curiosity overcoming her exhaustion. "Whatever needs doing," Vincent said, which was no answer at all. Then he touched the brim of his hat again and walked away, his long strides eating up the distance until he disappeared around the corner. Lily stood on her porch for a long time, staring at the spot where he had vanished, wondering if she had imagined the entire encounter. But no, her arm still felt warm where he had held it, and she could still hear his words echoing in her mind. Sometimes laughter heals better than tears. She went inside, into the dim coolness of the house, and looked around at the space that had been her home for all 22 years of her life. The furniture was simple but well made, the floors swept clean, the walls decorated with her mother's embroidered samplers and a few faded photographs. It should have felt like sanctuary, like safety. Instead, it felt like a cage. The rest of the day passed in a strange blur. Lily sat in her mother's rocking chair by the window, watching the shadows lengthen across the floor, waiting for something she could not name. As evening approached, she heard footsteps on the porch and braced herself for another confrontation. But when the knock came, it was soft, almost apologetic. She opened the door to find Martha Crawford, one of the few women in Los Lunas who had shown her any kindness after her mother's death. Martha was a widow herself, about 15 years older than Lily, with a practical, no-nonsense air and kind eyes. "I brought you some supper," Martha said, holding up a covered basket. "Figured you might not feel like cooking tonight." Lily's eyes prickled with unexpected tears at this simple gesture of kindness. She stepped back to let Martha in, and the older woman set the basket on the kitchen table before turning to study Lily with a concerned expression. "That was quite a scene at the funeral," Martha said carefully. "I know," Lily said miserably. "I do not know what came over me. One moment I was standing there perfectly fine, and the next I was laughing like a lunatic. I could not stop myself." "Grief is a strange thing," Martha said, echoing Vincent's words without knowing it. "It does not always come out the way we expect. I cried for 2 days straight when my Henry died, then woke up on the 3rd day and ate the biggest breakfast of my life. Felt guilty about it for weeks, until I realized that was just my body telling me it was time to keep living." "The whole town thinks I'm mad," Lily said, "or worse, that I did it on purpose to draw attention to myself." "Some people will always think the worst," Martha acknowledged, "but not everyone, and the ones who matter will understand that you have been through a terrible time and handled it the best you could." She paused, then added delicately, "I saw that cowboy walk you home. Vincent Zavala, he said his name was." Lily felt heat creep into her cheeks. He was just being kind. He did not want Mrs. Henderson to make more of a scene. Martha said, in a tone that suggested she had her own thoughts on the matter, but was too polite to voice them. "Well, kind or not, It is probably for the best that someone got you away from there. Things might have gotten uglier otherwise. She moved toward the door, then turned back. Lily, dear, I know this is not my place to say, but you do not owe this town anything. If you need to leave, to start fresh somewhere else, do not let fear or obligation keep you here. After Martha left, Lily ate the simple meal of beans and cornbread without really tasting it, her mind churning with the events of the day. She had lived her entire life trying to be good, trying to be proper, trying to meet everyone's expectations, and in one moment of uncontrollable emotion, she had destroyed all of that careful work. But had she really? Or had she simply revealed the cracks that had always been there, the fault lines in a life built on obligation rather than desire? She went to bed that night with no answers, only questions, and slept poorly, haunted by dreams of laughter and judgment and a pair of whiskey-colored eyes. The next morning brought reality crashing down with brutal efficiency. Lily went to the general store to buy flour and found herself met with cold stares and pointed whispers. The storekeeper, usually friendly enough, was curt and distant, practically throwing her change at her rather than placing it in her hand. As she left, she heard Mrs. Henderson's voice, loud enough to be clearly intentional, saying something about shameful displays and young women with no proper guidance. Lily walked home with her head high, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her hurt, but inside she felt something crumbling. This was her life now, she realized. This was what she would face every day if she stayed in Los Lunas. Judgment, scorn, social isolation. She thought of Martha's words from the previous evening about not owing the town anything, and for the first time, she let herself truly consider the possibility of leaving. But where would she go? She had a little money saved, enough to live on for a few months if she was careful. But what would she do after that? She had no skills beyond basic housekeeping and could barely read beyond an elementary level, having left school at 14 to care for her ailing mother. The world beyond Los Lunas seemed vast and terrifying, full of dangers she could only imagine. She was sitting on her porch that afternoon, shelling beans more for something to do with her hands than because she needed them, when Vincent Zavala appeared walking down her street as casually as if he had every right to be there. "Afternoon, Miss Forsythe," he said, stopping at the base of her porch steps. "Mr. Zavala," Lily replied, surprised by how glad she was to see him, this stranger who had witnessed her worst moment. "I did not expect to see you again. I assumed you would have moved on by now." "I was planning to," Vincent admitted, "but it turns out Los Lunas is more interesting than I thought." He glanced meaningfully at her, and Lily felt that heat in her cheeks again. "Mind if I sit?" Lily gestured to the other chair on the porch, and Vincent climbed the steps and settled himself with the easy grace of a man comfortable in his own body. Up close, in the clear afternoon light, Lily could see more details. The way his hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck, the laugh lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled more than his serious demeanor might indicate, the strong, capable hands that rested loosely on his knees. "How has your day been?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Truthfully, terrible," Lily said, abandoning any pretense at polite conversation. "I went to the general store this morning and was treated like I had committed murder rather than laughed at an inappropriate moment. Mrs. Henderson is telling everyone who will listen that I am unhinged and dangerous." "Dangerous," Vincent repeated, and there was amusement in his voice. "I have met dangerous people, Miss Forsythe, and you are not one of them." "You do not know me," Lily pointed out. "True enough," Vincent agreed, "but I am a fair judge of character, and I see someone who has been holding herself together for far too long and finally cracked a little. That is not dangerous. That is just human." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, and Lily found herself studying his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way the afternoon sun turned his eyes to liquid gold. There was something solid about him, something steady, and she realized with a start that she felt safer in his presence than she had in months. "Why are you really still in town?" Lily asked. "And please do not tell me it is because Los Lunas is interesting. This place is many things, but interesting is not one of them." Vincent turned to look at her directly, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "Would you believe me if I said I wanted to make sure you were all right?" "We are strangers," Lily said, but her voice came out softer than she intended. "Why would you care?" "Because sometimes you meet someone and you just know. Vincent said simply. Know that they matter, somehow. Know that walking away would be the wrong choice. Lily's heart was beating too fast in her chest, and she did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing at all. The silence stretched between them, charged with something she did not quite dare to name. Finally, Vincent stood. I should go, but Miss Forsythe, Lily, if I may call you that, I want you to know something. What those people think of you, their judgment and their scorn, it does not define you. You get to decide who you are and what your life means. No one else. He left then, before she could respond. And Lily sat on her porch watching him go, feeling as if the world had shifted slightly on its axis. She went to bed that night with his words echoing in her mind and slept better than she had in weeks. The next few days fell into an unexpected pattern. Vincent would appear at some point each day, sometimes in the morning, sometimes in the afternoon, always casual and unhurried, as if he had all the time in the world and nowhere else to be. He never stayed long, never pushed for more than conversation. But Lily found herself looking forward to his visits with an intensity that both thrilled and frightened her. They talked about everything and nothing. He told her about his life, about growing up in Texas with a Mexican father and an Irish mother, about learning to ride and rope and shoot before he could properly read. He spoke of years spent drifting from ranch to ranch, town to town, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. There was a restlessness in him, she sensed, a deep-seated need to keep moving, but also a loneliness he did not quite acknowledge. She told him about her own life, so much smaller and more confined than his, but no less real. About her father dying when she was 10, thrown from a horse and breaking his neck. About her mother's slow decline, the consumption eating away at her lungs bit by bit until there was nothing left. About the dreams she had harbored as a girl, foolish dreams of travel and adventure that had seemed to die along with her mother. They are not foolish, Vincent said when she mentioned this. They were sitting on her porch again, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and pink over the distant mountains. Dreams are never foolish. Sometimes they just wait for the right moment to come true. I am 22 years old, Lily said. My moment for dreams has passed. Now I am just the mad woman who laughed at a funeral. You are 22 years old, Vincent corrected, which means your life has barely started, and you are not a madwoman. You are just someone who felt too much and let it out in an unexpected way. He was right, Lily realized. She was young, despite feeling ancient most days. She had decades ahead of her, decades that could be filled with something more than social judgment and small-town gossip. The question was whether she had the courage to reach for something different. On the 5th day after the funeral, Mrs. Henderson came to call, accompanied by Reverend Morris and 2 other prominent town matrons. Lily saw them approaching and felt her stomach sink, knowing this could not be good news. Miss Forsythe, Mrs. Henderson said when Lily opened the door, her voice dripping with false concern. We have come to discuss a matter of some delicacy. Lily did not invite them in, standing firm in her doorway. What matter would that be? Your behavior at the funeral has caused considerable talk in the community, Reverend Morris said, his thin face pinched with disapproval. We are concerned about your state of mind, your fitness to live independently. Cold dread washed over Lily. What exactly are you suggesting? We think it would be best if you accepted the Hendersons' generous offer to take you into their home, Mrs. Henderson said. You clearly need guidance, supervision. Living alone is not appropriate for a young woman in your position, especially one who has demonstrated such instability. I am not unstable, Lily said, fighting to keep her voice level. I had one moment of poor judgment. That does not make me insane. Nevertheless, we feel this is the proper course of action, Reverend Morris said. If you do not agree willingly, we may have to take more serious measures to ensure your welfare. The threat was clear, and Lily felt panic rising in her chest. They could declare her incompetent, have her committed to an asylum, or placed under guardianship. It had happened to other women, women who had done far less than laugh at a funeral. The law gave them that power, especially over a woman with no family to protect her. I need time to consider, Lily said, knowing it was a weak response but unable to think of anything else. You have until Sunday, Mrs. Henderson said. After church services, we expect your answer. The right answer, Miss Forsythe. They left, and Lily closed the door and leaned against it, her legs suddenly weak. This was worse than social ostracism. This was her freedom, her very life, being threatened because she had dared to step outside the narrow bounds of acceptable behavior. She was still standing there, trying to calm her racing heart, when someone knocked softly. She opened the door expecting Martha and found Vincent instead, his face grave. "I saw them leaving," he said. "What did they want?" Lily told him, the words tumbling out in a rush. Vincent's expression grew darker with each sentence, a muscle jumping in his jaw. "They cannot do that," he said when she finished. "They cannot force you into anything." "They can," Lily said bitterly. "Or at least, they can make it legal enough that no one will question it. A woman alone, with no male relatives to vouch for her character, is vulnerable in ways you cannot imagine." Vincent was quiet for a long moment, his eyes thoughtful. Then he said, "What if you were not alone? What if you had someone to vouch for you?" "I have no one," Lily said. "Martha is kind, but she has no influence, and everyone else has turned against me." "You have me," Vincent said quietly. Lily stared at him. "You are a drifter, a cowboy passing through. What possible influence could you have?" "More than you think," Vincent said. "But that is beside the point. Lily, I know this is sudden. I know we have barely known each other a week, but I have a proposition for you." Her heart was hammering again, but for a different reason now. "What kind of proposition?" Vincent took a deep breath, and she saw that he was nervous, this confident, capable man, actually nervous. "Marry me, come with me when I leave Los Lunas. We will go wherever you want, do whatever you want. You will be free of this town and their judgment, and they will have no legal standing to control you." Lily felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "That is insane. We barely know each other." "We know enough," Vincent said. "I know that you are brave and strong and capable of more than this town will ever let you be. I know that when I am with you, I feel less restless, more at peace, than I have in years. I know that the thought of those people controlling your life makes me angrier than anything has in a long time." He stepped closer, and she could see the intensity in his eyes, the absolute certainty. "I know that sometimes the best decisions are the ones that sound crazy." "And what do you get out of this?" Lily asked, because she had to know, had to understand what he was truly offering. "A chance," Vincent said simply. "A chance at something real, something that matters. I have been drifting for 10 years, Lily, never staying anywhere, never letting myself care about anything too much. But you make me want to try. You make me want to be the kind of man who stays." Lily could not breathe, could not think. This was madness, utter madness. You did not marry a man you had known for less than a week, no matter how much you enjoyed his company. But, then again, what were her alternatives? Stay in Los Lunas and be forced into the Hendersons' home, watched and controlled for the rest of her life? Try to run on her own with no money, no skills, no protection? "I do not love you," she said, needing to be honest about that at least. "I know," Vincent said, "and I do not love you, not yet. But I think I could. I think we both could, given time and a chance." He held out his hand to her. "Say yes, Lily, take the chance. I promise you, whatever happens, it will be better than staying here." She looked at his hand, strong and steady, and offering her a lifeline, offering her a way out. She thought of her mother, who had spent her whole life in Los Lunas, who had married a man she barely knew at 17, because that was what women did. Her mother's life had not been unhappy exactly, but it had been small, confined. Was that what Lily wanted for herself? No. The answer came clear and certain from somewhere deep inside her. No. That was not what she wanted. She wanted more, wanted adventure and freedom and a life that belonged to her. And if that meant marrying a cowboy she barely knew, well, perhaps that was just another kind of adventure. "Yes," she heard herself say, and watched Vincent's face transform with a smile that made him look years younger. "Yes, I will marry you." He caught her hand in his, and the touch sent electricity racing up her arm. "Thank you," he said, and she realized that he had genuinely not been sure of her answer, that he had been taking as much of a risk as she was. "We should do it soon, before Sunday, before they can interfere." "Tomorrow," Lily said, feeling reckless and terrified, and more alive than she had in months. "Can we do it tomorrow?" "We can do it today if you want," Vincent said. "But tomorrow is probably more practical. It will give you time to pack, to say goodbye to anyone you want to say goodbye to." He paused. "Are you sure about this, Lily? Truly sure? Because once we do this, there is no going back. You will be tied to me, for better or worse." "I am sure," Lily said, and was surprised to find that she meant it. "I am terrified, but I am sure." Vincent lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, the gesture so courtly and unexpected that it made her blush. "Then tomorrow it is. I will make the arrangements with the justice of the peace. You just be ready to become Mrs. Zavala." He left, and Lily went back inside her house, looking around at the space that had been her whole world for so long. Tomorrow it would all be different. Tomorrow she would be married to a man she barely knew, embarking on a journey into the unknown. She should be terrified. She was terrified. But underneath the fear was something else, something bright and fierce, and almost like hope. She spent the rest of the day packing her few belongings into a single trunk. She could not take much, but she took the things that mattered: her mother's wedding ring, a few photographs, some clothes, and practical items. The furniture, the house itself, would stay behind. She wrote a note to Martha, thanking her for her kindness and explaining her decision. She knew Martha would understand, even if she was surprised. That evening, as the sun set over the mountains, Lily sat on her porch one last time and let herself feel everything. The fear, yes, but also the excitement, the anticipation, the sense of standing on the edge of something vast and unknowable. She thought of Vincent, of his steady presence and his quiet strength, and felt something warm uncurl in her chest. Not love, not yet, but the possibility of it, the beginning of it. She went to bed early and slept deeply, dreamlessly, and woke the next morning to brilliant sunshine streaming through her window. It was Saturday, August 17th, 1878, and it was her wedding day. Lily dressed carefully in her best dress, a simple blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. She pinned her dark hair up in a neat bun and looked at herself in the mirror, seeing a stranger looking back, someone braver and bolder than the woman who had stood in the chapel a week ago and laughed at all the wrong moments. Vincent arrived at mid-morning, riding a tall bay horse and leading a pretty chestnut mare. He had cleaned up, shaved, and put on what were clearly his best clothes, simple but neat. He smiled when he saw her waiting on the porch, and Lily felt her heart skip in her chest. "You look beautiful," he said, and the sincerity in his voice made her believe him. "You look quite presentable yourself," Lily said, and was rewarded with a laugh. "High praise indeed," Vincent said. He helped her load her trunk onto a pack horse he had acquired, then handed her up onto the chestnut mare. "Her name is Rosie. She is gentle and even-tempered. I thought she would suit you." Lily settled into the saddle, grateful that she at least knew how to ride, even if she had not done so much in recent years. They rode through the quiet morning streets of Los Lunas toward the Justice of the Peace's office, and if anyone saw them and wondered, they did not stop to ask questions. Justice of the Peace. William Foster was a practical, no-nonsense man in his 50s who raised his eyebrows when Vincent explained what they wanted, but asked no difficult questions. "You are both of age and of sound mind?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Vincent said. "Yes," Lily confirmed, her voice steady. "Any legal impediments to this marriage? Existing spouses, close blood relation, anything of that nature?" "No, sir," they said in unison. "Very well, then." Foster produced a marriage license from his desk. "I will need 2 witnesses. My wife can serve as one, and I will fetch my clerk for the other." 10 minutes later, they stood in William Foster's small, neat office with his wife and clerk as witnesses, and Lily heard herself repeating vows that had been said by countless couples before her: to love and to cherish, in sickness and in health, until death did them part. Vincent's hand was warm around hers, his voice steady and sure as he spoke the same words. When Foster pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent leaned down and kissed her gently, carefully, a promise more than a claiming. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Zavala," Foster said, signing the marriage license with a flourish. "May you have a long and happy life together." They rode out of Los Lunas an hour later, when the sun was high and hot overhead. Lily did not look back, did not let herself think about the life she was leaving behind. She looked forward instead, at the mountains in the distance, at the endless blue sky, at the broad back of the man who was now her husband. Vincent glanced back at her and she smiled back, feeling the strangeness of it, the weight of that gold band on her finger that had belonged to his mother and now belonged to her, They rode north, following old trails through scrubland dotted with juniper and pinon. Vincent set an easy pace, mindful of the heat and Lily's inexperience with long rides. They stopped frequently to rest the horses and drink from their canteens, and Vincent pointed out landmarks, told her about the country they were passing through. "Where are we going?" Lily asked during one of these stops, as they sat in the shade of a rocky outcrop and shared jerky and hardtack. "I thought we might head up towards Santa Fe," Vincent said. "It is a bigger town, more opportunities. You could find work if you wanted it, or we could keep moving. Whatever you prefer." "What do you want?" Lily asked. Vincent was quiet for a moment, chewing thoughtfully. "Honestly, I do not know anymore. I have spent so long just drifting that I have forgotten what it is like to want to stay somewhere. But maybe that is something we can figure out together." They made camp that night beside a small creek, the water trickling over smooth stones, the air finally cooling as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. Vincent built a fire and cooked beans and bacon in a battered skillet while Lily tended the horses, unsaddling them and rubbing them down the way her father had taught her years ago. They ate in companionable silence, and then Vincent spread out bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire. Lily appreciated the gesture, the respect he was showing for her comfort and her choices. They were married in law, but that did not mean he expected immediate intimacy. They were still strangers in so many ways, still learning each other. "Vincent," Lily said as they settled down for the night, the fire crackling between them. "Thank you for offering me a way out, for not expecting more than I can give right now. I know this is not exactly a normal marriage." "Nothing about us is normal," Vincent said, and she could hear the smile in his voice, even though she could not see his face clearly in the darkness. "But that does not mean it cannot be good. We will make our own kind of normal, Lily. One day at a time." She fell asleep to the sound of his breathing and the crackle of the fire, feeling safer than she had any right to feel, sleeping on the ground in the middle of nowhere, with a man she barely knew. But somehow, impossibly, she did feel safe. She felt like maybe, just maybe, she had made the right choice. They spent 2 weeks on the trail, moving slowly north through the high desert country of New Mexico territory. The days fell into a rhythm: wake with the sun, break camp, ride until the heat became unbearable, rest during the worst of the afternoon, then continue until evening. Vincent taught her things her father never had: practical skills like how to track water, how to read the land, how to shoot his rifle with reasonable accuracy. In return, she cooked meals that were more elaborate than his trail fare, using the supplies they bought at small trading posts along the way. But more than the practical exchange, they talked. They filled the long hours on the trail and the quiet evenings by the fire with stories and questions and the slow, careful process of getting to know each other. Lily learned that Vincent had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh, that he was surprisingly well-read for a cowboy, that he had a deep respect for the land and the people who lived on it. She learned that beneath his restless exterior was a man who longed for connection but had never known how to ask for it. Vincent learned that Lily was smarter and more observant than her limited education might suggest, that she had a quiet strength that had allowed her to survive years of caregiving and grief, that she saw the world with an artist's eye, even though she had never learned to paint. He learned that her laughter that day at the funeral had not been madness, but release, a soul finally letting go of burdens too heavy to carry alone. And slowly, carefully, they began to fall in love. It did not happen all at once. It was not the lightning strike of romance novels or the instant passion of cheap fiction. It was quieter than that, subtler. It was in the way Vincent always made sure she had the best spot by the fire, the way Lily started anticipating what he needed before he asked for it. It was in the casual touches that became more frequent, his hand on her back as he helped her over rough ground, her fingers brushing his as she handed him coffee in the morning. It was in the way they stopped sleeping on opposite sides of the fire and started sleeping close together, then closer still, until one night, Lily woke to find herself curled against Vincent's chest, his arm around her waist, and did not move away. They reached Santa Fe in early September, when the aspens were just beginning to turn gold in the high country. The city was bigger than Los Lunas, more cosmopolitan, with a plaza surrounded by adobe buildings and a mix of Mexican, American, and Indian influences. Vincent found them a room in a modest boarding house run by a cheerful Mexican woman named Señora Gutierrez, and they spent a few days simply resting, recovering from the journey. "What do you want to do?" Vincent asked one morning as they walked through the plaza, watching vendors setting up their wares. "We have enough money to last a while, but eventually we will need to figure out what comes next." Lily looked around at the bustling square, at the people going about their lives with purpose and direction, and felt something shift inside her. "I want to learn," she said suddenly. "I want to read better, write better. I want to know things, understand things." "Is that foolish?" "Not at all," Vincent said. He looked thoughtful. "There is a teacher here, a woman named Miss Alvarez, who runs a small school for girls. I met her years ago when I was passing through. She might be willing to take you on as a student, even at your age." Miss Alvarez turned out to be a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a sharper mind, who looked at Lily assessingly when Vincent brought her to the small adobe building that served as a schoolhouse. "You want to learn," Miss Alvarez said, not a question, but a statement. "Why?" "Because I spent my whole life taking care of other people," Lily said honestly. "I never had the chance to take care of myself, to build my own mind. I want that chance now." Miss Alvarez smiled, a slow, approving smile. "Then you shall have it. Come 3 times a week in the afternoons. I will teach you to read and write properly. And if you prove an apt pupil, we will move on to history, mathematics, philosophy. There is no limit to what you can learn if you are willing to work for it." So, Lily became a student again at 22, sitting in a classroom with girls half her age and feeling no shame about it. She devoured books the way a starving person devours food, reading everything Miss Alvarez gave her and asking for more. She practiced her letters until her hand cramped, until she could write a clear, legible script that would have made her mother proud. She learned about the world beyond New Mexico, about countries and cultures she had never imagined, and felt her mind expanding, opening, becoming something new. Vincent, meanwhile, found work with a freighting company, hauling goods between Santa Fe and smaller settlements. It was honest work, well paid, and it suited his skills. But more importantly, it kept him close to Santa Fe, close to Lily. The restlessness that had defined his adult life was still there, but it was quieter now, easier to ignore when he had something, someone, to come home to. Their marriage, which had started as a practical arrangement, a rescue more than a romance, began to transform into something real. They were no longer sleeping on opposite sides of a fire, but sharing a bed in their small room at the boarding house, and the intimacy between them deepened naturally, inevitably. The first time they made love, a month after their wedding, it was gentle and unhurried, both of them nervous and careful with each other. But it was also sweet, filled with tenderness and a growing affection that was maturing into something deeper. "I think I am falling in love with you," Lily whispered one night, lying in the darkness with her head on Vincent's chest, listening to the steady thump of his heart. She felt him smile, felt his arms tighten around her. "I think I'm already there," he said. "Have been for a while now. I was just waiting for you to catch up." Lily laughed and turned to kiss him, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world, this connection between them, this partnership they were building day by day. It was not the life she had imagined for herself, but it was better, richer, more real than any fantasy she might have conjured in her small house in Los Lunas. The autumn passed into winter, and Santa Fe wore a blanket of snow that transformed the dusty adobe into something magical. Lily continued her studies with Miss Alvarez and discovered she had a talent for mathematics, for the clean logic of numbers and equations. Vincent continued his work, but he also began talking about the future, about maybe buying a small ranch somewhere, putting down roots properly. "Would you want that?" he asked Lily one evening as they sat by the fire in their room, snow falling softly outside the window. "A ranch, I mean, animals and land and all the work that comes with it. Or would you rather stay in town, keep studying?" "I do not know," Lily admitted. 6 months ago, I thought my life was over, that I was destined to spend my days as a social outcast in a town that hated me. Now, I have options, possibilities. It is overwhelming." "We do not have to decide right away," Vincent said. "We have time. That is the beauty of this, Lily. We have time to figure it out together." But time, it turned out, had its own plans. In January, Lily realized her monthly courses were late. At first, she thought it was just the stress of change, the adjustment to a new life. But when another week passed, and then another, she could no longer deny the truth. She was pregnant, She told Vincent on a clear, cold evening, the words tumbling out nervously because she did not know how he would react. They had not talked about children, had not planned for this. It was too soon, they were still figuring out their own relationship. But Vincent's face, when she told him, lit up with such pure joy that it took her breath away. "A baby," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "We are going to have a baby." He pulled her into his arms and held her tight, and Lily felt tears spill down her cheeks, but they were good tears, happy tears. This was not the life she had planned, but it was the life she was living, and it was good. It was so good. "Are you happy?" she asked, needing to hear it. "I am terrified," Vincent said honestly. "I have no idea how to be a father, but yes, Lily, I am happy. I am so damn happy I could shout it from the rooftops." They told Senora Gutierrez, who immediately began fussing over Lily and insisting she eat more, rest more, take better care of herself. They told Miss Alvarez, who congratulated Lily, but also made her promise to continue her studies for as long as she was able, because learning did not stop just because a baby was coming, and they began tentatively to plan for a future that included a child. Vincent found a small house on the outskirts of Santa Fe, nothing fancy but solid and with enough room for a growing family. They moved in February when Lily was 3 months along and just starting to show. She spent her days making the house a home, sewing curtains and baby clothes, planting a garden that would bloom in spring. Vincent built a cradle from rough wood, sanding it smooth and painting it carefully, and Lily watched him work and felt her heart overflow with love for this man who had rescued her from a life of judgment and given her something infinitely better. The baby was born in late August of 1879, exactly 1 year after they had married. It was a long labor, difficult and painful, but when Lily finally held her son in her arms, dark-haired and red-faced and perfect, she knew it had all been worth it. They named him Thomas after Vincent's father, and he became the center of their world. Vincent proved to be a devoted father, patient and gentle with the baby in a way that surprised even him. He would walk the floor with Thomas for hours when the baby was fussy, singing old Mexican lullabies his own mother had sung to him. He changed diapers without complaint and learned to heat milk to just the right temperature. And he looked at Lily with such profound love and gratitude that it made her realize how far they had both come, how much they had grown together. But even as they settled into the rhythms of parenthood, even as their love for each other deepened and matured, there were still echoes of the past. One day, about 6 months after Thomas was born, Martha Crawford appeared at their door. "Martha!" Lily exclaimed, shocked and delighted to see her friend. "What are you doing in Santa Fe?" "I came to see you," Martha said, embracing Lily carefully, mindful of the baby on her hip. "I heard through the grapevine that you were here, that you had married and had a child. I wanted to see for myself that you were happy." They spent the afternoon catching up, and Martha told her what had happened in Los Lunas after Lily's departure. Mrs. Henderson had been furious when she discovered Lily had married and left, claiming she had been deceived and used. But most people had simply shrugged and moved on to the next scandal. Life in small towns went on, and eventually everyone forgot about the woman who had laughed at a funeral. "And you?" Lily asked. "How are you?" "I am well," Martha said. "Actually, I am moving to Albuquerque. My sister lives there, and she needs help with her shop. It seemed like a good time for a change." She smiled. "Seeing you leave so bravely, it made me realize I did not have to stay in Los Lunas either. So, thank you for that, Lily. Thank you for showing me it was possible." After Martha left, Lily stood in her small house holding her son, looking around at the life she had built with Vincent, and felt a fierce gratitude for that moment of uncontrolled laughter a year ago. If she had not laughed, if Vincent had not been there to defend her, if she had not taken the chance he offered, she would still be in Los Lunas, trapped and controlled. Instead, she was here, free and loved, and building something beautiful. The years passed, marked by the milestones of family life. Thomas took his first steps, spoke his first words, grew from a baby into a bright, curious toddler. Lily continued her studies sporadically, fitting learning into the gaps between childcare and housework. And Miss Alvarez remained a friend and mentor. Vincent's work with the freighting company progressed, and he became a partner in the business, giving them financial stability they had never expected. When Thomas was 2, Lily became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, her body knowing what to expect. Their daughter was born in the spring of 1882, a tiny, perfect creature with Vincent's amber eyes and Lily's dark hair. They named her Isabel, and she completed their family in a way they had not known it was incomplete. Vincent, watching Lily nurse their daughter one evening while Thomas played at their feet, felt a contentment he had never imagined possible. He had spent so many years running from connection, from commitment, afraid of being tied down. But this, he realized, this was not being tied down. This was being anchored, held steady by love and purpose and the knowledge that he mattered to these people, that his presence in their lives made a difference. "What are you thinking?" Lily asked, noticing his thoughtful expression. "That I am the luckiest man alive," Vincent said honestly. "That I found you, or you found me, and you were brave enough to take a chance on a drifter cowboy with no prospects." "You had prospects," Lily said, smiling. "I saw them from the beginning. You just needed someone to believe in them." She shifted Isabel to her shoulder, patting the baby's back gently. "And I needed someone to believe in me, to see past one moment of poor judgment to the person I could be. We saved each other, Vincent. That is what makes this work." In 1884, Vincent finally bought the ranch he had been dreaming of, a small spread about 20 miles north of Santa Fe, with good grazing land and a creek that ran year-round. They moved there in early summer, trading their comfortable house in town for the harder, more isolated life of ranching. But it was a good life, a full life, and Lily loved the work, despite its challenges. She learned to handle cattle, to mend fences, to do all the 1,000 tasks that came with running a ranch. And she taught Thomas and Isabel alongside their daily chores, determined that her children would have the education she had fought so hard to gain. The ranch prospered slowly, but steadily. Vincent had a good eye for cattle and a better one for business, and within a few years, they were doing well enough to hire help during busy seasons. They built additions onto the original small ranch house, adding rooms for the children and a proper study where Lily kept her growing collection of books. The place became known throughout the territory as the Zavala Ranch, and they built a reputation for fair dealing and hard work. In 1887, when Thomas was 8 and Isabel was 5, a third child joined the family, another boy they named James. By then, Lily was 31 and Vincent was 35, and they were firmly established as pillars of their small ranching community. People came to them for advice, for help, for the steady, reliable presence they represented. But success and stability did not erase the past. Sometimes, especially on quiet evenings when the children were asleep and they sat together on the porch watching the stars, Lily would think about that day at the funeral, about the uncontrollable laughter that had changed her life. She would think about how close she had come to a very different future, how a single moment of perceived madness had actually been the sanest thing she had ever done. "Do you ever regret it?" Vincent asked one such evening, as if reading her thoughts. "Marrying me? Leaving everything you knew?" "Never," Lily said without hesitation. "Do you regret stopping your drifting to tie yourself to one woman in a ranch full of responsibilities?" "Not even for a second," Vincent said. He reached over and took her hand, their fingers intertwining with the easy familiarity of years together. "That day at the funeral, when I heard you laugh, I thought I was hearing the sound of someone finally breaking free, and I knew I wanted to be part of that, whatever it took." "Laughter heals better than tears," Lily quoted back to him, remembering those words that had meant so much on that terrible day. "You were right about that. I spent so long crying quietly on the inside, being what everyone expected me to be. The laughter was me finally letting out everything I had been holding in. And now?" Vincent asked. "Now I laugh all the time," Lily said, smiling in the darkness. "With the children, with you, at life and all its absurdities. I laugh because I am happy, because I am free, because I have the right to express joy without fear of judgment." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, the distant lowing of cattle, the whisper of wind through the tall grass. This was their life now, solid and real, and built on a foundation of mutual respect and growing love. It was not the grand romance of storybooks, but it was better, richer, because it was earned, chosen, worked for every single day. The children grew. Thomas became a serious, studious boy, with his mother's love of learning and his father's steady calm. Isabel was bright and fearless, always exploring, always asking questions. James was still too young to show much personality beyond cheerful determination, but he was clearly going to be a handful. They filled the ranch house with noise and laughter, and the beautiful chaos of family life. Vincent taught them to ride and rope and read the land. Lily taught them letters and numbers and how to think critically about the world around them. Together, they raised children who were confident and capable, who understood hard work, but also knew how to find joy in simple things. The Zavala children were known throughout the territory for their good manners and quick minds, and their parents were rightfully proud. In 1890, when Lily was 34, Miss Alvarez came to visit the ranch. She was older now, moving more slowly, but her mind was as sharp as ever. She spent a week with the family, teaching the children advanced mathematics and discussing philosophy with Lily in the evenings. "You have done well," Miss Alvarez told Lily on her last evening there, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "When you first came to me, you were a frightened young woman who had just escaped a terrible situation. Now look at you, a successful rancher, a devoted mother, a woman who has educated herself and is educating her children. I am very proud of you. I could not have done it without you," Lily said, feeling tears prick her eyes. "You gave me the tools to build a different life." "I gave you some tools," Miss Alvarez corrected gently. "But you did the building, Lily. You and Vincent together. Never forget that. The courage was yours." After Miss Alvarez left, Lily thought a lot about courage, about the different forms it could take. There was the courage of Vincent, who had offered marriage to a virtual stranger because it was the right thing to do. There was the courage of taking that offer, of riding away from everything she knew into complete uncertainty. But there was also the courage of staying, of working hard day after day to build something lasting, of choosing love and commitment when it would have been easier to run. The 1890s brought changes to the territory and to the Zavala Ranch. New Mexico was modernizing, slowly but surely. Railroads spread across the landscape, connecting remote communities to the wider world. Towns grew, became cities. The wild, lawless quality of the frontier began to fade, replaced by something more settled, more civilized. Vincent adapted to these changes, finding new markets for their cattle, new opportunities for profit. He became involved in territorial politics, not seeking office himself, but supporting candidates who understood the needs of ranchers and farmers. He was respected, listened to, his opinion sought on matters of importance. The restless drifter he had been was gone, replaced by a man who had found his place and was determined to make it better. Lily, too, found ways to contribute beyond the ranch. She started a small school for the ranchers' children in the area, teaching them the basics that she herself had once lacked. It met twice a week in their ranch house, and she loved seeing young minds awakening to the possibilities of education. She also became known as someone who could help with difficult births, having learned much from her own experiences and from the other ranch women. People came to her for advice, for comfort, for the calm competence she radiated. Their marriage, which had started as an arrangement of convenience, had deepened into something profound. They knew each other completely now, knew strengths and weaknesses, fears and dreams. They had weathered hard times together, years when the cattle prices dropped and money was tight, seasons when drought threatened their livelihood. But they had also celebrated triumphs together, watched their children grow, built a legacy that would outlast them both. "I love you," Vincent would say sometimes, usually at unexpected moments, when they were working side by side or sitting together in the evening. And every time, it felt fresh, new, a reminder that love was not just a feeling, but a choice, an action, something you did every day. "I love you too," Lily would answer, and mean it with every fiber of her being. This man who had rescued her, who had offered her freedom and then stayed to help her build a life, this man was the best thing that had ever happened to her. The laughter at the funeral, which had seemed like the worst moment of her life, had actually been the doorway to everything good that followed. In 1895, Thomas left for university in the East, determined to study law. It was hard to let him go, to watch their oldest child ride away toward a future they could barely imagine. But they were proud too, proud that they had raised a son who could dream big and have the education to pursue those dreams. Isabel, at 13, announced her intention to become a teacher like Miss Alvarez. She was already helping her mother with the small school, showing a natural talent for explaining difficult concepts in ways young children could understand. Lily and Vincent encouraged her, knowing that the world was changing, that women had more opportunities now than they had even 20 years before. James, at 8, was showing signs of becoming a rancher like his father, more interested in cattle and horses than in books. That was fine too. The world needed ranchers, and James would be a good one, raised with the values of hard work and fair dealing. The turn of the century found the Zavala family prosperous and content. They had weathered the transition from frontier to civilization, had adapted and grown and built something lasting. Their ranch was one of the most successful in the territory, known for quality cattle and honest business practices. Their children were educated, capable, ready to make their own marks on the world. Vincent was 50 years old now, his dark hair streaked with silver, his face lined by years of sun and weather. But he was still strong, still capable, still the steady presence that Lily had come to depend on. They had been married for 22 years, had built a life that neither of them could have imagined when they started. Lily was 44, her own dark hair showing threads of gray, her hands roughened by years of hard work. But her mind was as sharp as ever, still hungry for knowledge, still pushing herself to learn and grow. She corresponded regularly with Miss Alvarez, who had finally retired, and with other educators throughout the territory. She had become something of an advocate for rural education, arguing that children on remote ranches deserved the same opportunities as children in towns. They stood together one evening on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sun set over the mountains in a blaze of orange and gold. It was a view they had seen thousands of times, but it never got old, never failed to fill them with a sense of peace and rightness. "Do you remember that day in Los Lunas?" Lily asked, her head resting on Vincent's shoulder. "The funeral, the laughter, all of it?" "Every detail," Vincent said. "I remember seeing you standing there, tears streaming down your face, laughing like you would never stop. I remember thinking that was someone who needed help, needed a way out. I remember not being able to walk away. I remember you telling me that laughter heals better than tears," Lily said. "I did not believe you then. I thought laughter had destroyed my life. But it did not," Vincent said. "It saved it. It saved both of us, really. I was drifting toward nothing, running from everything. You gave me a reason to stop, to stay, to build something real." "We built it together," Lily corrected. "Every bit of it." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the last light fade from the sky. Inside, they could hear James practicing his reading, Isabel helping him with a particularly difficult passage. The ranch house was full of life, full of love, full of everything they had worked so hard to create. "I am happy," Lily said softly, simply. "After everything, after all the fear and uncertainty and hard work, I am truly happy. Are you?" "More than I ever thought possible," Vincent said. He turned to kiss her, a kiss that held 22 years of shared history, of laughter and tears, of joy and sorrow, of love that had grown from something small and uncertain into something vast and unshakable. More than I ever dreamed. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and family milestones. Thomas graduated from law school and returned to New Mexico to practice, eventually settling in Albuquerque with a wife and children of his own. Isabel went to teacher's college and came back to teach in Santa Fe, bringing new ideas and methods that she shared with her mother. James took over more and more of the ranch operations as Vincent slowed down, proving himself a capable manager with a good head for business. Vincent and Lily grew old together, their love mellowing and deepening with time. They had grandchildren now, a whole new generation of Zavalas running around the ranch during visits, filling the house with noise and energy. They watched their children succeed, watched their grandchildren grow, and felt the satisfaction of a life well lived. On their 30th anniversary in 1908, their children threw them a party at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from miles around to celebrate with them, to toast the couple who had become such an integral part of the community. There were speeches and laughter and stories told about the early days when Vincent and Lily were young and just starting out. Vincent stood to say a few words, pulling Lily up to stand beside him. 30 years ago, he said, his voice still strong despite his 63 years, "I met a woman who was brave enough to laugh at the wrong time, who was brave enough to take a chance on a stranger, who was brave enough to build a life from nothing but determination and love." He turned to look at Lily, and the love in his eyes was so clear, so pure, that it brought tears to everyone watching. "Lily, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. I would do it all again, every hard moment, every challenge, just to end up right here with you." Lily smiled through her tears and stood on her toes to kiss him, and the crowd erupted in applause and cheers. This was their legacy, not just the ranch or the children, but the love they had built, the example they had set for how to weather life's storms together. Vincent lived to see the territory of New Mexico become a state in 1912, a moment he had worked toward for years. He stood in the plaza in Santa Fe, holding Lily's hand as the celebrations went on around them, and felt a deep satisfaction. This place that had given them a chance, that had allowed them to build a life, was finally getting the recognition it deserved. He died peacefully in his sleep in 1915, at the age of 70, with Lily beside him as she had been for 37 years. The loss was devastating, a wound that cut to the core of her being. They had been partners for so long that she hardly knew who she was without him, but she did not fall apart, did not crumble. She grieved deeply and truly, but she also remembered his words from the first day. Sometimes laughter heals better than tears. So she told stories about him, funny stories and sweet stories and stories that captured the essence of the man he had been. She laughed through her tears at the memories they had made together, and slowly, gradually, the grief became bearable. He had given her 37 years of love and partnership, had helped her become the woman she was meant to be. That was something to celebrate, not just mourn. Lily lived another 12 years, watching her grandchildren grow into adults, watching the world change in ways she could never have imagined as a young woman in Los Lunas. She saw automobiles replace horses, saw airplanes take to the sky, saw women gain the right to vote. She saw the world transform, but the core things, the important things, remained the same: family, love, the value of hard work and integrity. She died in 1927, at the age of 71, surrounded by her children and grandchildren in the ranch house she and Vincent had built together. Her last words were about Vincent, about how she would see him soon, how she had missed him every day but had tried to live a life that would make him proud. They buried her next to him in the small cemetery on the hill overlooking the ranch, and her children marked both graves with simple stones that spoke of lives well lived, of love that lasted, of two people who had taken a chance on each other and built something beautiful from that leap of faith. The Zavala Ranch continued for generations, passed down through the family, the story of Vincent and Lily becoming part of family lore. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren heard the tale of how their ancestors met, about the funeral and the laughter, about the cowboy who offered rescue and the woman brave enough to accept it. The story became a reminder that sometimes the worst moments can lead to the best outcomes, that courage comes in many forms, and that real love is not found but built day by day, choice by choice. And in Los Lunas, where it all began, the story of Lily Forsythe was remembered too. The woman who laughed at a funeral became a local legend, not as a cautionary tale, but as a story of bravery, of refusing to be defined by other people's judgment. Over the years, as attitudes changed and evolved, people looked back on that day differently. They saw not madness, but humanity, not disrespect, but raw emotion finally finding release. And some, especially young women feeling trapped by expectation and propriety, drew courage from her example, remembering that sometimes the most scandalous thing you can do is also the most necessary. The old adobe chapel where it happened still stood, weathered and worn, but enduring. And on quiet days, if you listened carefully, you might imagine you could still hear it. The sound of a woman laughing, loud and free and utterly unashamed. The sound of a soul finally breaking free from everything that had held it back. It was the sound of healing, of hope, of life beginning anew. And somewhere, in whatever comes after, two souls stood together, watching the legacy they had built, the family they had raised, the love that continued to ripple outward through generations. Vincent held Lily's hand, and she leaned against him, and they smiled at each other with all the warmth and affection of a lifetime shared. "We did all right," Vincent said. "We did better than all right," Lily corrected, laughing. "We did magnificently." And that laughter, joyful and unrestrained and full of love, echoed through eternity. A reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let yourself feel. Let yourself be fully human in all your messy, complicated glory. That laughter heals better than tears. That love, real love, is worth every risk, every uncertainty, every moment of fear. Their story ended, as all stories must. But the love they built, the legacy they left, the example they set, those things endured. In the children who carried their names and their values, in the ranch that still bore their mark, in the countless small kindnesses and brave choices rippling outward through time. They had started with nothing but a funeral, an inappropriate laugh, and a cowboy's simple wisdom. They had built everything from that fragile foundation, and it had been enough. More than enough. It had been perfect.